Hello and welcome back, and that's right, I'm still here in Shenzhen, China, talking to different Chinese manufacturers, brands, NAS builders and more, and finding out exactly how they work, seeing their production lines, seeing their teams, and ultimately finding out the company culture and more. Now today, I want to talk about Minisforum. They're probably one of the darling brands in the whole mini PC game, and when they did launch their NAS, or at least showed off their NAS at CES 2025, a lot of users took note. Minisforum products, I think it would be fair to say, are the most uniquely designed mini PCs in the market compared to many out there, and I thought it a very prudent opportunity while I'm here to explore and find out more about them. Now, let's get the early disclaimers out the way early doors. I'm not being paid by Minisforum. They have no control over this video. They did not invite me to their headquarters when I traveled to China. What happened was, me and Eddie at NAS Compares discussed that we're talking about so many brands that come from China, why don't we send one of us, guess who, over to China and then ask all of those brands if we can visit their headquarters. And that's what we did, and Minisforum kindly said that we could go, and they gave us no limitations to what we could film. There was one limitation to do with R&D, but we'll talk about that later on in the video. But that's really it. Again, I'll probably send this to them before it goes out, but they won't be able to change anything unless I say something that is proven inaccurate. But without further ado, let's crack on. So on the morning of the 25th, I was picked up outside my hotel by 3 members of the team of Minisforum. Hopefully there's some of that footage there on screen. My translator for the day was the guy that runs their live stream and does a lot of their YouTubing and other platform stuff, some of their short videos. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later when I saw their recording studio. The journey took about 40 to 50 minutes. I'm sorry it's noisy here, but it's noisier in my hotel, weirdly. And during the journey, I asked a lot of questions about the NAS device. They told me a lot more about that. We've got a whole dedicated video there. I asked a lot more about their team. They have around 300 members of staff, they told me. And I will say that while I was there, I saw about 150 to 170 people on their office premises there. So that 150 broke down vaguely to about 40 to maybe 50 people in the main office, and then the production line had about 50 to 60 people there, and finally you had the testing support RMA section, and that had a further 50, maybe 60 people. Now once you factor in breaks, shifts, holidays, blah blah blah, chances are, and even if you include global staffing as well, that 300 number is probably pretty accurate. So once we arrived, we went up about 2 or 3 floors, and when we got there, we reached the Minisforum company headquarters. It's the entire floor of the building, and there were a few office spaces that were empty, but they explained to me that they were established as Minisforum in 2018, and they'd moved into that building in late 2021. For expandability. So when they moved in, they obviously allowed for a lot more space to scale out. I also saw lots of pallets being lined up for logistics moving into the trades lift. So I saw a lot of sitting stock there. Again, when I saw a lot of the warehouse and the packaging area, you could tell it was funneling through, but it was quite a busy operation there. I will say, of all of the manufacturing and production facilities that I visited, this one was definitely the cleanest. Now, I'm not an idiot, as I've mentioned in other videos. I've worked in factories. I worked in a health food factory for a few years, one of my first ever jobs, and I've worked in retail. I know what it's like when there's a big visitor. I know what it's like when some big wig comes from downstairs, has a big look around, or a trade visitor comes in. You want to show the shiniest version of things. But much like when I visited the CWWK factory, you can make people wear shiny uniforms, but the workstations you can see where, the flooring around workstations you can see where, and there is where you find out if it is legitimately that people are there and they're there regularly. And I saw all of that, the little things that you look for. Also the anti-static bands to stop people harming the goods when they go through production. We'll talk more about the production line later. Now, that main floor could be broken down into 5 key areas. The regional sales, and that was in-country regional sales. Presumably a lot of that was wholesale or larger supply. Then there was international sales. That also included special areas for Amazon and presumably AliExpress and Alibaba. They didn't commit that. Then you had the marketing sections there, and that's where we got to take a little look at their live streaming YouTube operation there. And I'll be honest, it kind of humbled my own setup there, but nevertheless, it was all sort of built into that marketing team for communication, blah, 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 and web development and the display of the web pages. The development area, the R&D, was arguably slightly smaller than all the other areas. It had fewer staff, but we'll talk about it later on. They have dedicated product managers, which isn't unusual in this industry, who basically own the product. That development is their plan. I'm sorry about the noise surrounding me here. Again, it's noisier in the hotel room. Next, Showroom. There was a showroom that kind of showed the history of the company, so it had every single product that Minisforum had ever developed. It had a few that I didn't even recognize, which I presume are mid to late 2025 products. But on top of that, there was their accolades, their licensing, a lot of the company history, the photos of the old building and more. Again, I kind of got used to that now after visiting a few different facilities, but it's still really pleasing to see. I understand that is predominantly for users that are arriving as purchasers or big buyers or system integrators, so they can get more about it. But it's still nice to see that all laid out there. And I asked them a few curveball questions via the translator, and then they had a secondary member of staff who spoke English, and they were able to answer even quite technical questions about PCIe distribution and PCIe split switches. So fair play to them. Now let's talk about that production line and the factory warehouse facilities a little bit more, because I know a lot of you are going to want to know about that more than anything else. You know, be it that your queries are ethical or if your queries are just about quality control. I will say that for the most part, I liked what I saw there. Now, I've visited a few different production facilities here while I've been in Shenzhen. I would say this one was the one that had more human on-site manufacturer than automation. There was automation, and obviously there were elements of it where people were feeding it into CPU placement and semi-automated areas where devices were being stress tested, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But this one, the ratio felt a little bit more like 30% automation, 70% humans online, whereas a lot of the ones I've visited thus far here in Shenzhen have been more 50-50. Now, there's arguments on both sides for that one, because automation, obviously, there aren't jobs at automation. There is an element of mass production and reliability. So I'm not going to make any kind of value judgment on them having more humans than automation or more automation than humans in any case, but I'm just showing you what I see. I will say that the people that I saw there seemed chuffed. I spoke to a couple of people there. They seemed pretty reasonable. One of them was, doing the job to support his parents. One of them just got retired. He seemed okay with it, quite laughy and jokey. Again, I know I'm seeing a sanitized version of events when I'm there. Let's be realistic. They were never going to let me in without, at least cleaning up the place. But I will say, I didn't give them a huge amount of notice. I was talking to them for the better part of 10 days. I've known about this trip for about 3 months. And moreover, they didn't agree to the tour until about 3 days over WeChat prior to me arriving, because of the timing and getting things lined up, some people coming out of Shanghai, I think. But when I was looking at the sales office and the office teams, and again, this isn't a value judgment, this isn't positive or negative, I'm just telling you what I saw. When I was looking at the sales teams and looking at the marketing teams, the desks had individuality. The people were wearing their own clothes. The desks had toys. They had weird little semi-build their own Rubik's Cube things. There wasn't a sense of drone about the whole thing. Yes, it's a job. It's a 9 to 5er or I think a 9 to 7er they do here with a 2-hour break there in the middle of the day. But from what I saw there, I didn't see anything that would concern me. But again, I know I'm not going to be as, scalpel level analytical in this trip as I could have been perhaps. But again, I'm trying to cover as many brands as I can. But as I was going through, taking photos, taking video, I will say I was taking a bevy of notes. And when it came to the production facility, I'll say this right now. One, they have serial number tracking, something that I think is a de facto standard. I want to know, for example, if a product at the end of the production line, that serial number, if I find a fault with it, and they can track it through the production line, they were able to do that. There is the photography services. It was multi-laned as well, so they had not one production line, they had several of them running concurrently. On top of that, they had numerous products in production across different lines. I actually saw, again, the NAS products being developed there in the new chassis as well, and they showed me not only the distinctive differences between the chassis in the R&D office later, but they also showed me as it was going through the production run, the inside and the outs there, and that's where I spoke to someone for a brief bit. They didn't have an anti-static dust chamber, and because I don't know a lot about the technicals of a lot of this stuff, when I have visited production lines that do have anti-dust, anti-static chamber that you have to go into, it made me wonder, one, were the companies that I visited being overcautious, undercautious, or is Minisforum think they probably don't need to within that area of production? I'm not sure, but I just thought it was worth noting that for some of you. And lastly, as these products are coming off production line, they were going into, via another couple of rooms that I'm going to talk about in a moment, eventually into the warehouse for packaging, for the retail packaging, and eventually onto those pallets for distribution that I mentioned earlier on. But what was really interesting is they had multiple rooms there for testing and getting analytical data on some of the stuff we see on the specifications. Yes, we could talk about performance benchmarks. Yes, we could talk about maximum support. But what I really like to see, and I didn't see this, by the way, on any other factory tour that I did while I'm in Shenzhen, by the way. So maybe they had it and they didn't show me and they didn't think it was good enough, or they third party these operations. They had the aging room. An aging room, and I've seen this in Taiwan with a few NAS manufacturers. Acer Store has a fantastic one, by the way. An aging room is when you have all of the systems being stress tested for extended periods of time to make sure they're not going to fall over. There's rack after rack after rack of units. Now, I don't know if that's every unit, or more likely that is one in every so many for a statistical quota from different production line runs, but nonetheless, it was nice to see it there, stress testing those components over a given period of time. The next room was the mute room. Again, another thing that maybe other companies have, but I didn't ever see it at any other production facilities rather than them third-partying it, and that is a soundproof room where they can operate a system and get the general ambient noise in different levels of operation there. They let me go in. I thought they were going to lock me in, but I'm glad they didn't. Finally, they had the shock room. The shock room where they had the system in retail packaging and different levels of stress, be it shock absorption, movement, logistical shock, and they were just showing that their systems within those different packaging environments and deployment environments, what the level of shock that they could endure. Again, maybe this is something the other brands that I visited have, and they just didn't think it was worth showing. But Minisforum were quite pleased to show off this line of their production run, and I was really pleased to see that they had that being done in-house. Now I want to talk about the research and development. I alluded to this earlier on in the video, but Minisforum, and I can only speak from my own perspective, but I think this is a general vibe that you get, and I hate to just immediately highlight Reddit, but when it comes to mini PCs, Minisforum have somehow carved an ever so slight distinction in the market from other mini PC vendors. Not so much for obviously where they're made or any kind of software advantages. They don't make the CPUs, but their production, the PCBs, the unique designs, a lot of their chassis and deployment methodologies are actually a note different to a lot out there. That also means they're a little bit more expensive than everyone else, but it is, I wanted to explore the research and development and find out, one, are all of the IPs in-house, and two, do they keep those IPs or sell them on? And it seems like, yes, they are all developed all in-house, and two, they do not sell them on. Obviously, I've got to take them at their word. I couldn't sit there at the time and grill them like Paxman, but at the same time, everything I saw from the PCB production images and a lot of the slideshows that I attended and watched did indicate this is all done in-house, and I've not ever really seen many Minisforum designs look like they've been officially repurposed by other brands there. Look at the MS01 or the MSA2, very unique devices for different reasons. I've never seen that deployment by another brand. Now, when I asked them about how they go about their production line, research and development, that was the thing I found the most interesting. And this may be something, again, that other manufacturers I visited do, but Minisforum made a point of making this very, very clear. And again, maybe they're doing it to look nice and shiny, but nonetheless, I liked what I heard, and that was that the product managers, and this isn't unusual, by the way, I've met a lot of brands that do this, the production managers are in charge of their baby product. It's their solution. They design it from the ground up. They see what can be done. It's their operation, their vision to a point. And I spoke for a great deal of time to the developer of the NAS solution that they are working on right now. And that product manager was telling me a great deal about how she wanted the system to evolve, how she saw what it needed to be, hence the 64 gig drive that is going to be included as an option within their NAS solution, so you don't have to drop a storage drive. Or when they were talking about the Oculink choices between the PCIe and distributing the lanes, there was a lot of that, and they were showing me the feedback process. They were showing me a lot of the way in which they look at how their system's used, the feedback forms that they sent out to people. Now, when it comes to how they develop products afterwards, or when they release a solution and research a refresh product, one of the things I'm not able to show is the very, very, very early examination of the follow-up to the MS01 and what the refresh of that will look like in 18 months to 2 years. Obviously, there's no point waiting out for it, but it was nice to see that they could see what they were showing me, how people were using it and what they liked and what they didn't like, and how they were going to use that with the next iteration there. And it was nicely shown and displayed how they explore that in, kind of current time for a solution coming out in a great deal of time in the future, hence why I can't show it here. But an example that I can talk about a little bit more, and I may be making a dedicated video on this soon, was to do with that M.2 NVMe expansion card I talked about on the channel a while ago. Do you remember that card? There was a prototype to add 6 M.2 NVMe slots into the MS01, and they were examining it, and some of the biggest hurdles had to do with cooling and easier installation, and also changing the external chassis, which has obviously been designed for horizontal airflow, and then you're integrating 6 M.2 NVMe slots at different angles. Now, one of the things they're looking at right now, when they're still earlier in development at the kind of CAD 3D design with very few physical examples, is a kit form upgrade for the MS01, for example. And this would be a large replacement panel for that base panel of the system that sits above with the SSDs. The kit would include the main board, it would include the heatsink there on the top, and obviously mounting brackets, but it would also include a vertical stand, because the SSD bays are at the base where the table is, and therefore the heat generation. The slots will be at ×1 speed, but they need the system to sit vertically so those heat sinks can dissipate effectively into the air. And they were walking me through their design process there. It was really nice they were showing that off. And again, I'll make a dedicated video on this soon, but what was really interesting for me about it was nice to see the thought process. And although whether they meant to do it or not, I had a camera set up during the course of the meeting because I wanted to use it as B-roll to show you guys that we were rabbiting away. But in the course of that B-roll, I could see the date of the slides, and it was clear these were slides that aggregated over several months there. It wasn't just we knocked these up before this knobber turned up in our country. Now, I go into a lot more detail on the NAS development, the R&D, the potential Debian software, the different variations of that product, and how it's splintered in development. And I'll talk about that more in that dedicated video that may already be live. But I'm just going to summarize this video and kind of wrap things up, because I will be coming back here soon. Number one, as mentioned, by far of all the brands that I visited, it was the best vibe, which I know is a useless word. But the vibe of the staff, the vibe of the offices, the vibe of the workstations, both in and out of the production line, seemed the most positive to me of anyone that I visited here while I've been here. I like how much power and freedom the product managers have. I like that because then you are creating something that you want to envision and put your personality and your stamp on. That's when you're looking at a lot of the production line of Minisforum products, they were at pains to highlight that one of the main reasons a lot of their solutions are so unique to one another compared to a lot of mini PC brands, they tell me, because of that unique vision of the individual product manager, as they research into the deployment of that device. Again, it might all be soft soaping me, it might be shiny text that they're just trying to tell me, but there must be a grain of truth in that when you look at that production line. And next up, they do care about standing out, and I think, yeah, I'll give them that, notwithstanding their website and the way things are laid out. And they did ask me, by the way, a few questions about the layout of specifications on their NAS upcoming page. Again, I can't show it here, but they do care about being distinct. They know it's going to make their product cost more, and I know when we say their products cost more, it's kind of funny sometimes when I look at it as far as Europe and the US, when we look at the cost of their mini PCs and we compare them against GMK Tech, Geekcom, B-Link and stuff like that, who have very similar products, they are more expensive than them. But then when you look at, say, the MS01 and products and their price point, they're actually a great deal cheaper than most of the other options in the market. So it was quite funny to hear them say that. Also, product development isn't rushed. That was very interesting to me. They said they had 50 product SKUs. So again, that doesn't mean 50 product lines. SKUs can also mean variations of different CPU, storage or memory. But that 50 is not a lot for a company that's been around since 2018. 50 different individual product SKUs, even if we were generous and said that is 40 unique products, that's still not a lot for a company that's been around since 2018. So they clearly don't rush development in a way that some brands might. And again, I know you may think I'm being overly flattering, but it was a generally very positive tour. They were enthusiastic about their product. Some of the translator was having a nightmare keeping up with 3 people talking at him simultaneously, me responding. It was that fraught, the conversation, in terms of the enthusiasm and talking about the product, which, again, for such a niche topic as NAS, and I mentioned this in my CWWK video, is incredibly refreshing. There was no recording limits. I loved that. The only time they asked me to not have the camera running was when they were showing the documents for products and potential developments coming out in a year to 2 years' time, which makes sense. Also, they were the only brand I visited here that didn't discuss having an NDA. They didn't make me sign an NDA, they didn't limit what I could see, and I really wanted to include that in this video because I've made a point of mentioning NDAs in other videos, and this one they didn't. Now, if we're going to discuss, cons, negativities, again, number one, their production facility. I think there are going to be mixed feelings about the fact that it is, how much of it's automated and how much of it's human. And again, there's pros and cons on either side. About production, about having humans who can spot things versus automation, but then you can bring in the whole argument of people get tired, people make mistakes, but there was multiple tiers there during their RMA procedure. But again, I know there are going to be some users that would have liked to have seen more automation and human checks in between. Next up, even though obviously they were prepared for my visit, all of those pallets in the corridor and how much sitting stock there was getting ready to be loaded into lorries, it made me wonder why that was all there and why it couldn't just be funneled straight into a warehouse. And, mistakes can happen that way. Again, it's a very small complaint. It's almost churlish, but it was just the idea that I was going into their offices and saw pallets of stock. The offices were clean and tidy, as you would expect, but make of that kind of thing what you will. And also, I know there's going to be some of you out there that probably would have liked to have seen that dust chamber entrance point there as people were going in. Again, because I don't know enough about the mass production technique of products like this, and also the amount of human contact, I don't know about the necessity of it. So hopefully if there is someone in the comments that knows more about that, about just how necessary something like that would be great to know. But that's really it about everything that I saw and learned while visiting Minisforum at their headquarters here in Shenzhen, China. Again, this is my last day here. I visited quite a few brands, and I'm not going to do direct comparisons because I'm obviously seeing a very shiny version of any of these day-to-day operations. So I'm not going to be as churlish as to compare them all together. But I will say what I saw left me happy. It left me more, I was already pretty confident in their product, and I saw nothing today that made me have doubt in that. Now, I'm going to be coming back to Shenzhen in a few months' time, and obviously I'm going to be heading over to Taipei for Computex as well. So I'm going to try to visit a few more brands when I am there. I generally try not to give too much notice. I try to give maybe a week or two's notice, and then I will ask them for their permission. And if they say no, I understand, everyone's busy. But hopefully I will be able to review and monitor some other brands in the very near future. And I'm sure, as I make this video, there are other brands watching this who want to see how other factories run their operations who are watching this right now. If you are watching this and I do email you, or you want me, if you can extend an invitation for me to visit your factory, you can ping me an email, because I think people do want to know how things run in-house in a lot of these brands that are on the other side of the world, and we just want a better picture of what's going on inside. And thank you so much for Minisforum for allowing me so much time and freedom in their HQ. If you've got any questions, do let them know in the comments below. Presumably Minisforum are going to watch that as well, so they might answer your comments, so I'm not going to speak for them. But if you want to know more about my trip, and if maybe you want me to elaborate on something I saw, let me know below, or you can email me at robbie@nascompares. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.